Good morning and welcome to Book Club Corner. My name is Joel Green and we are here every Wednesday in the beautiful capital of Scarborough, Tobago, where we chat with local authors about their love of the written word, about books, which we love. So all the bibliophiles, right? This is for you. This is your dog whistle. Get in here. Today we have with us an amazing author, and we are going to be chatting with him about his work. He's not just a published author in the sense that you would think. He is a journalist. He's a writer for life. He writes and makes art. And Shaun, we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Joel. As I was saying to you, I wasn't sure if I was worthy to be in this space.
Here, listen to him.
But I'm happy to share any information that I have, the knowledge that I have, and the stories that I can hopefully share with you, which can be helpful to anyone else who's watching.
I am so excited to get into this conversation. But before we do that, you know what we do on Book Club Corner. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be viewing from, whether you're in Curacao, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, you're looking on Amplia 102, or you're on YouTube, on Facebook for the Tobago updates pages. You know, we have to get our wine in. We support local winemakers here in Tobago. And we have another brand from, Luke Lashley. He has this wine, and this one is called 4F. Luke, I don't know if it meant,
Luke needs to explain himself.
4 times the F, I don't know, right? We're going to keep it PG today, but we're going to get into this wine. And you know how we do it, the 5 S's of wine tasting, where we look at the wine, the clarity, the color, we swirl the wine. We're looking for the legs, that's the sugar content, and then we sniff the wine. And we sip and we savor.
It's an impressive wine, I have to say. It's refreshing, definitely. It's what do they call it? Its aroma is enticing. The flavor is, I would say, medium sweet.
You're right.
But not too dry. And it's a good wine. The clarity is almost crystal clear, I would say. It's a good wine, so I congratulate the winemaker.
This is from Luke Lashley. Thank you, Luke, so much
well
for
done,
this
Luke.
wine.
Cheers to you.
Listen, Christmas is coming up. Get your local wines. I know people are soaking their fruits already. Get your wines to soak your fruits or your rums. You make a delicious liqueur. Don't think I forgot. I had a birthday lime and you brought the sorrel liqueur. No, it was sorrel liqueur.
Oh yeah, for true, yes.
Let me tell you, Shaun had all the ladies. Who make this? Who make this? Where the body go on? Where he is?
Well, I have to confess that that was my debut in liqueur making. But it was that year I had a good crop of sorrel, but since then the sorrel cultivation hasn't been happening.
It's true, and you're barely seeing it out there anyway.
It's true. It's true.
Something is going on with the sorrel, and that's a hibiscus. They're susceptible to mealybugs and those kind of things. So I think something may be going on there. But you vaulted me into making a liqueur. I don't know if you remember. I made a citrus liqueur.
Yes.
I called you on the phone, Shaun. Give me the recipe.
Oh yes, yes.
and while you were talking, I was there cutting up the fruits and doing. We won't sell out the recipe. If you wanted, get on to Shaun and let him tell you what the recipe is, right? But we're going on a quick break. When we come back, we are going to get into what is known as the Windrush generation, right? I don't know if you all know about that or have heard about it, but we're going to get into it. We're going on a quick break. There's so much good stuff to talk about today. You don't want to miss this episode of Book Club Corner. Trust me. Don't go far. Get your drinks and your snacks and come right back. See you in a few minutes.
Cheers.
With the, let me tell you, the prolific and the giant of a man, Shaun Biggart-Hutchinson, and we're talking to him today about all his journalistic adventures. He's not just a journalist, but he's also a committee member for this committee, the Translinguistic Exchange and Translation. He's a contributor at the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday, at the Trinidad and Tobago Guardian. He's also the editor at the Tobago Writers Guild Publishing House Limited. He's a writer at Caribou, did I say that correct?
Correct.
Environmental News Network, and he's an editor with Eutille Duncan Publishing, and she was here with us last week. So let me tell you, and this isn't all of it, huh?
That's just like a snapshot of some of the work over several years.
Yeah, you write prolifically, and you help other magazines. You edit with other magazines too.
I've been known to edit a blog, the Caribbean Empowerment blog. I'm arts correspondent and deputy editor for New Black Magazine.
Yes, I saw
blog,
that.
which I've been. But New Black Magazine, I've been the arts correspondent for maybe 10 years. So I've been known to write on cultural, social, even political and sporting issues for that publication. So yes, I do quite a few things.
Yeah.
But you described me as prolific. I'm proud of what I've achieved and what I do.
Yes.
But I'm not necessarily a prolific writer. And it's important to say this as a journalist. Journalists have to write. Those who are in print journalism, those who write, because there's also broadcast journalism. But in terms of the written word, speed is important, content is important, and substance is important. But it's not necessarily the volume that is the most important thing. This is my opinion on the question of journalism. Accuracy, importance, capturing the story, reporting on the story is the most important thing. And in terms of my writing, my journalism, I focus more on reflective writing rather than on the spot, day-to-day reporting and journalism. So just in case people expect to see encyclopedias of my work somewhere, or volumes of my work somewhere.
Let me tell you, you write widely.
Right.
That's what I like about your work. And you know, I'm always encouraging you to put a book together, right? You know me, I'm always like, Shaun, when are you gonna do that book? Shaun, when is that book coming out? And so I'm like, well, that's a nice idea, but I'd have to think about it.
Yeah, well, you see, Joel, I'm a humble brother. I'm a humble brother. And when I read or hear of or see published like compendiums or anthologies of the work of writers, I don't put myself in that category.
Yeah,
this
really?
is just my own like humility, you might say. So I do write, and I have published both here in Tobago, in Trinidad, and in London. But I don't see myself as at that level of some of these published journalists who have anthologies of their work. Not that I'm lacking in any confidence about myself, but I just do the work. I just do the writing. I write.
Keep your head down and do it.
Right.
Well, listen, as you said, London, I'm so glad you brought it up, because you know I've been having this conversation with you about the Windrush generation.
Yes.
And it's coming up more and more, trickling down into the Caribbean for us to talk about and hear. And a lot of persons don't know what it's really about, right? They're hearing it and saying, well, what's that? Well, we want to get into this conversation, this Windrush generation conversation, and we have a short video for you.
They've come to seek work in Britain and are ready and willing to do any kind of job that will help the motherland along the road to prosperity.
The relationship between this country and the West Indies and Caribbean is inextricable. When my parents and their generation arrived in this country under the Nationality Act of 1948, they arrived here as British citizens. Thousands of British men and women denied their rights in this country under her watch in the Home Office. Can she tell the House how many have been denied health under the National Health Service? How many have denied pensions? How many have lost their job? This is a day of national shame, and it has come about because of a hostile environment policy that was begun under her Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I share the Honourable Gentleman's admiration for the people who came here from the Caribbean and contributed so much to our society.
I want to apologise to you today because we are genuinely sorry for any anxiety that has been caused.
Windrush generation. They call this phenomena, this movement, this migration of people, talking about it, saying the Windrush generation, because 1948, and that was the year my mother was born, 1948, the
HMS Windrush
sailed into Essex with 492 people on it. That was the first sailing from the Caribbean.
Correct.
Upon the invitation of England for Caribbean people to come and help them rebuild after World War II.
That's right. Well, the HMS Windrush.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, the British government have been using this phrase, Windrush generation, to describe the people who came on that boat, on that vessel in 1948, and the generations after them. So the children and grandchildren of those who came in 1948. It must be stressed, however, that people from the Caribbean were coming to England, were traveling around the world, in fact, to either Canada or the United States and other places far and wide, even South America, Venezuela, Colombia. We are international people, but we were coming to England at that time at the invitation, as you said, of the British government, who were facing economic and political crisis in the aftermath of the Second World War. And they decided that to address some economic problems and employment shortages, they would go to a source. So the source was the Caribbean. The source was us.
Yeah, the colonies.
The colonies. The source was the colonies. So they went to principally the Indian subcontinent and to the Caribbean and to an extent Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone. And they invited people to come to do work that the British workers at that time were reluctant to do. That's work in the health service, work in transportation, work in refuse, garbage collection. So that Windrush, what's known as the Windrush generation, those people who came on the HMS Windrush in 1948, they landed at famous Tilbury docks, and from there they dispersed throughout the country to take up jobs. And an interesting thing about that, 1948 predates later invitations to people of the Caribbean to come to the United Kingdom. But one of the most notorious British politicians by the name of Enoch Powell, he was a health minister in the 1950s. He toured the Caribbean, inviting people to come to work in the National Health Service. Within the next 15 or 20 years, he became well known as a politician who was looking to deport these migrants from England. He became known as a notorious racist, a notorious politician who wanted to turn back the time to deport black people.
Don't say so.
So when we're talking about the Windrush generation, this is what we're talking about generally. We're talking about people of Caribbean descent who moved to England in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
And 70s, I think.
And 70s up to now.
1971.
And also, I mean, it's important to stress that throughout that period, especially from the 1940s to the 1960s, all the legislation, all the political manoeuvring in the House of Commons, in the British Parliament, was designed to, ironically or paradoxically, to deter black people from coming to the country, or to make things more difficult for them, to make things difficult in terms of employment, in terms of healthcare, in terms of social care, in terms of education. So what they defined in the piece that you just showed as the hostile environment, which is that they wanted a hostile environment so people would not come.
Yes.
Because they're seen as a problem, they're seen as creating social and cultural issues in Britain. So when we're talking about the Windrush generation, that's like a negative factor. But generally speaking, my experience is that we don't really refer to ourselves as a Windrush generation.
Correct.
We refer to ourselves just as black people living in England or Caribbean people living in England. And the other side of that question, the other side of that equation is that all the developments, or many of the developments in the United Kingdom over the past 40 and 50 years, politically, socially, culturally, musically, we have been at the forefront of them.
Let's not talk about fashion.
No, fashion, of course, fashion as well.
Let's not talk about that.
All the most important developments. Football, if you want to talk about football, cricket, carnival, music, steel pan.
Well, let me tell you, when we start to talk about cricket, we heading into some very murky waters, right? When we had fast bowlers, right? Licking the wicket from this, and they had to be ducking.
Yes.
And they were not pleased.
It's true.
Right? And they changed the rules on us right then and there.
Yeah, another anecdote I could share about cricket. When I was a younger man or a younger adolescent, we used to go to Lord's, the Oval, to watch cricket with like my cousins and my dad and my uncles. This was in maybe the late 70s, early 80s, right? And at that time, the West Indies fans, the West Indies supporters would treat it like a carnival. It's like it's mass. You're going into, so you're making noise. You're going to have fun,
people,
right?
Yeah.
Well, the English authorities wanted to repress that exuberance, you might say. So they banned us from running onto the pitch, from making noise. They wanted a more genteel environment. But now,
when they come to the Caribbean for cricket, have you seen their behavior?
Right.
Listen, they have the best time ever. They in the party stand doing as they just say the dog and the puppy. Right?
So it's ironic. It's ironic to look at the development of cricket and cricket support and cricket audiences.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that we brought to the table.
Listen, y'all are probably sitting down here wondering, who is this guy? Shaun Biggart-Hutchinson. The name sounds familiar, right? And that's because he's the great-grandson of James Biggart. And that's not the only reason you're here, right? And that's a great reason for you to be here, to have this conversation with me today. But let me tell you, Shaun, I kind of trick you.
You have to drink some wine for that.
What's going on with Top Boy?
Top Boy.
What's going on with Top Boy?
Talk about Top Boy. Top Boy is an interesting show, which presents a picture of London life.
Yeah.
Right. It's an interesting show. It's dramatic. It's well produced, well acted, interesting characters, great storyline.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of Top Boy. Eh? Well, you remember when they killed off my star? I call you upset. I dial you one. I say, Shaun, you need to speak to your people. What is going on here? No, but you look at it and you see hints of Caribbeanness in the community and the faces.
Yes.
And you start to say to yourself, England doesn't feel very English. It feels very us.
Well, I think Top Boy presents a picture of London specifically. London is multicultural, multinational. And like I say, the influence of the Caribbean people over time, those who are from the Caribbean to their successors, like my generation, second and third generation, the way we speak, the way we act, the way we dress, has influenced so many aspects of British life. And Top Boy, it could be said, dramatizes and portrays one aspect of the Caribbean experience in London. But our experience is not only related to like living in housing estates or projects and being bad Johns.
Listen, of course not.
It's we have multifaceted like.
Listen, we know our people. It's not just a multifaceted life we live in those spaces, but we're multifaceted people in terms of the type of things we get into, right? Highly educated. No education at all. I mean, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum.
Yes.
When we do get into education and we do excel, I mean, it's just so phenomenal. You're watching and you say, that's us?
Yeah, it's true.
That's us.
Yeah, well, we have plenty. I mean, we have academics
Just
across
smart.
all
I
disciplines.
mean, come on.
The sciences, the humanities, in art, in culture, so as well as I've said, in sporting endeavors. So the contribution and the influence of the Caribbean people in England is broad and very influential, I would say.
Let me tell you, when I look at you, I've seen some photos of James Biggart, and you all have a similar body type, right? I was telling her, I say, you know, he looks just like him in terms of body type, not facial, you know, but, you know, James Biggart was your great-great-grandfather.
Correct.
He has quite a legacy, right? Being the first black person and the first person to be elected, because before that there was an election, right? To be elected into the legislature and to represent Tobago. There was only one seat. It was the whole of Tobago, and he got it, right? And he was also on the committee that brought the first library and the first high school to Tobago, and that first high school was Bishop's. There was no high school before then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much to
quite
say
a
about
legacy.
the history of James A. Biggart, because in a way, his life, his contribution, his legacy typifies the nation building of Tobago, the development of Tobago at that time in the early 20th century. Now, just historically, and also anecdotally, as a young man, as a child, my father, George Biggart-Hutchinson, always talked about his grandfather. My grandmother, Edwina Biggart, always talked about her father, James A. Biggart. But when you're a young person, you don't really absorb or take it in or understand the gravity of what's being said to you. But all my uncles, my grandma, my dad, my aunts, they all spoke about James A. Biggart in very laudatory terms. And when my dad returned to Tobago 30 years ago, he embarked on a campaign to raise the profile of James A. Biggart. And it's at that time when I realized how serious he was and the influence that he had and the contribution that he made. And all of that, like people's wisdom, you might say, is corroborated in the literature by noted academics, especially Susan Craig James. In one volume of her book, she dedicates a section to James A. Biggart, and everything that she has written, has studied, has researched as a noted sociologist and researcher, corroborates the things that my relatives told me. So they said he was a VIP, he was a politician, he contributed socially, politically, and culturally. And if you look at the work of the academics, this is exactly what he did. So from that reading, anything that happened in Tobago in the early part of the 20th century, politically, socially, culturally, in terms of education, in terms of developing the infrastructure of the society, James A. Biggart was involved in it to some extent. And I'm proud, obviously, to be a descendant of him. I'm proud that he's a Tobagonian, but I look at it in the sense of emulation. What can we do today? We who are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we who are residents and citizens of Tobago, what can we do today to ensure that that legacy continues? And I think that what we can do is participate in the life of the country, in the development of the country, in the same way that James A. Biggart did at his level.
Yeah.
So he did it at a political level. He
Yeah.
was also a business person, a cultural and a cultural leader. So we can do those things, and that's how we can make a contribution to the same nation-building project, because it's a continuum from
Yes.
then to now.
Well, you have you studied Caribbean studies and politics at the London Metropolitan University.
Correct.
So you seem to be following in the footsteps of your great grandfather in terms of some of his interests.
Yes.
But we're going to be getting into that. We have some interesting conversations coming up. Listen, don't go anywhere. Don't go far. We're going to be getting into some more of these conversations in terms of some of the work that James A. Biggart has gotten into, and talking about the relevance of the conversation that's happening today with secession and autonomy and that autonomous continuum we're talking about. When we come back, we'll be talking about those issues and those conversations. So don't go far. Come right back here and join us on Book Club Corner right after the break. Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago, the wider Caribbean, wherever you may be, looking at us here on Book Club Corner. Thank you for being with us here today. We are here chatting with a journalist, a writer, a politically minded individual, as well as a self-proclaimed anti-imperialist, right?
Correct. I'm not ashamed of that.
And we are chatting here with Mr. Shaun Biggart-Hutchinson. Thank you for being here with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. You're giving me a serious build up there. I hope I can live up to it. I'll try my best.
Listen, you will not fail us, I know for sure. When we have this look at your work, at your body of work, as you say, you know, you don't look at volume, you're looking at quality. And I was saying to myself, you know, when I read your articles, I know this is Shaun. If even they were to hide your name, I know it is Shaun.
Right.
Yeah, there's a certain flavor and flow to it, right? Very punchy, very rhythmic and descriptive.
Right. Yes.
And some of the words that you use to describe are what I would term unusual words, right? You're the first one I heard with the word bucolic. I was like, bucolic? I mean, I love words, but I have never heard that one. Looked it up, was that a peasant enjoying the country life or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I loved it. Listen, if join the Look It Up Club, go and look it up. It's bucolic, new word for the day, right?
Just as a writer, as a journalist, you know, we have to be inquisitive, we have to be
Yes.
curious, we have to read as well. And one of the things, literacy is very important. You know, it's something that as humans is considered one of our superpowers, you might say, to be literate, to be able to read, write, and communicate. But you have to cultivate that.
Yes.
It has to be cultivated and nourished. So a habit that I have is I like to learn words. I like words. I like literature. I like lexicography, you might say.
Yes.
I like to understand what these words mean, and I like to use them in context. So this is important characteristics for journalists. So you're talking about me using some different type words. The issue is to use the words to explain what needs to be explained. So from a young age, I've been observing, I've been curious, I've been inquisitive, and I've been trying to transform that curiosity, that inquisitiveness, into how I write, how I speak, how I explain myself. So every writer has a voice. Every journalist has a voice, like a fingerprint or a personal characteristic. So one of the qualities, I think, of a good journalist, a good writer, is to be able to express themselves in writing, of course, but also to speak and write in a certain way so their characteristics are manifest and are expressed. So that's how I try to do my writing. That's how I try to prepare my articles, prepare my feature stories, my interviews, my reviews, whatever it is I'm writing. I try to speak in my voice, to use words that are enlightening, that are interesting, and also which carry the story, which carry the tale. So that's what I try to do. I mean, in the world of journalism, I've been writing for a long time, many decades. I always wanted to be a journalist from a young person. I didn't necessarily know how to enter the profession. I entered it, and in effect, I entered it by accident.
Really?
It wasn't like a conscious decision to go and become a journalist, although I did have the aspiration to do that. But I always used to write. I used to write articles. I always used to explain myself in writing in very descriptive, like you say, in very descriptive ways. And through the contacts that I had, through the people I knew, I got the opportunity to write for newspapers, magazines, publications, newsletters, and that's how I began. And I'm not promoting this as a way to get into journalism, but I developed that experience, and after developing that experience, then I went and got qualified.
Right.
So I would advise people to get qualified
Yeah.
at the beginning of the journey rather than at the end.
I don't know if I 100% agree with that, because let me tell you what I have noticed. A lot of persons head first into the qualifications and then realize they don't want to be here.
That's a good point.
You know, so
Yes.
sometimes the ability to have a peek into what is going to, what your future will look like if you were to get into this profession or that profession helps us.
Yeah, that's
May
true.
save us some time and years and some, heartache, because education may be free up until high school, but it ain't free.
No, definitely not.
Right?
Definitely
So
not.
sometimes I think, that ability to be able to say, let me have a look and see what this looks like, if I really like it, or if
Yes.
I was just romanticizing
Right,
this
it's important.
thing.
That
And
is
then
important.
get into it perhaps even as a mature student, because you've tried a few things and you've decided to yourself, this is what I want to do.
Yes.
I definitely want to do this, And I think there is something to be said about persons even changing careers because
Yes.
what they first went into wasn't what they wanted
Yes.
to do.
Well,
You
I
know,
think-
it wasn't their passion.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think I can definitely put down on my epitaph, not that I'm wishing anything negative, but I can definitely put down that I'm a
Yeah.
writer and journalist. I always wanted to be a writer and journalist.
Yes.
I am a writer and journalist. I've always been pursuing it one way or another,
Yeah.
and I'll continue to do that. And I do think it's important that if you have the ambition to do it, then you should go out and attempt to achieve it.
Yes.
And yeah, that's what I'm trying to
And
do.
you're an amazing editor as well.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Listen, let me give a short. The first time I had written a piece that I was submitting to the Guardian, and I sent it to you, and I said, Shaun, have a look at it. I don't know what I wrote, right? And it wasn't 2 words I wrote, but in 2 seconds flat, you sent it back.
Yes.
And I was like, he read this whole thing already? Yeah, you were like flash
Yes,
and literally cut straight to the quick. You was like, move this, take out this. It's fantastic, yeah, but all right. And I was like, okay, cool. And quick like that. And I, as you're talking about journalism and writing, the ability to quickly see what the story needs,
Yes.
what the story has, and what it doesn't have, the holes. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And I think that is an admirable quality and something, as you said, it's something that you nurture and will grow with you as you read
Yeah, I
and
think
work.
so. I think so. I think one thing as well to mention that's important in that context is that in the field of journalism, professional journalism, they have this is definitely. I'm not sure if they have it in the publications in TNT, but in the larger press, in the larger publications, they have sub-editors. So your journalist will go and write their story, write their report, write their article or their feature, and then you'll have a sub-editor who would go through that article. So I have experience as a sub-editor.
I see.
So to be a sub-editor, you have to be knowledgeable, clear, have a good vocabulary, be able to understand the story, be able to read it quickly, interpret it, and be able to correct or edit or change where necessary. So this is quite important, and this is also a skill that I've been able to strengthen and enhance over the last 10 years working as an editor. So I've edited several books here in Tobago, and when I was living in London, I've edited several books here in Tobago where people, via the Tobago Writers Group, Guild, should I say, have come to me and asked me to edit the manuscript of their potential publication. And I've done that. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline. It can be time consuming, but it's also rewarding because you see the evolution of the writer's ideas in their mind through the conversations that you have with them, to how they express their ideas, how they develop the narrative that they want to carry the reader along, and how it moves from one stage to the next. So of the books that I've edited here in Tobago, it's been a useful experience, a rewarding experience, and I hope the people that I've helped have found it equally rewarding.
Yes, I'm sure. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we are not done with you yet. The second half, how they say, the latter half will be better than the former. The latter shall be better than the former, or something like that. Let me tell you, go and get your drinks, go and get your snacks, come right back. We're going to be heading into some deep waters, wading into some deep waters, where we're going to be looking at a book called Identity and Secession by Larry Luke, and his conversation in that book about James Biggart and some of those discussions. So don't go far. We're going to be coming right back to Book Club Corner in a few minutes. Welcome back to Book Club Corner, where every Wednesday we chat with another author, a publishing industry stakeholder, about their love of the written word, about books, and where the literary arts is going in the Caribbean. And we're here with none other than Shaun Biggart-Hutchinson, a good friend of mine, a great storyteller. And we're getting into this conversation about James Biggart, right? One of Tobago's icons. And there's a book called Identity and Secession, Trinidad. I think it's Tobago versus Trinidad. And this is chronicling a time 1889 to 1980. And this book is by Larry Luke. And he has a portion in his book where he is talking about James Biggart. And he says, you know, he put Biggart just left of the midpoint of the autonomy continuum from secessionist to integrationist, describing him as a separatist who saw Tobago as having an identity and culture distinct from that of Trinidad. In Luke's assessment, Biggart set the stage for autonomists like A.P.T. James and A.N.R. Robinson, who would represent Tobago in the middle and latter part of the 20th century. And this book is Identity and Secession. When I read that quote, and I realized we have quite a muddle of terms. You know, when we start this conversation and we say autonomy, people hear secession. When they hear secession, they hear autonomy. They're not synonymous.
No,
right?
That's right.
And I decided, you know, let's talk about these terms. Let's clarify them so people understand and understand what they're talking about when we're talking about it, and what people should be talking about when they say it, right? You can't use them interchangeably.
Correct.
They're not the same, right? Take it from a girl who was in the Look It Up Club, okay? And what is the Look It Up Club? You go to your mother or your father and you say, what's this word mean? Or an adult, what's this word mean? And they say, go and look it up. Right? You got to get a pencil and a paper and write down the word and go and look it up, because they will ask you later, oh, you find the word, what does it mean? So go and look it up, right? So when we look at it, we have these terms we've put out there for you, and we're looking at the word secession. It is the action of withdrawing formally from membership of a federation or body, especially a political state. And the way they would use it, the republics want secession from the union. We have another term, and that term is autonomy. It is the right or condition of self-government. Between the First and Second World Wars, Canada gained greater autonomy from Britain. And for those who didn't know, Canada was a British colony and still is. Let me take it back, sorry. Canada is a British
Continues
colony,
to be.
right? And the last term we want to be talking about is integrationist. An integrationist is a person who believes that different groups of people, especially different races, should be able to mix together more. Integrationists may also support social integration or work for it, such as James Biggart in the Caribbean, namely specifically Tobago, and Martin Luther King. He wanted people to be able to come together instead of being separate. And when we have these conversations, well, you and I were talking before we even got into Book Club Corner, and, you know, when we have a conversation about the autonomy continuum, and I really like that phrase that Larry had in his book, that autonomy continuum. It isn't a destination, right? It's something that you can get more of and less of,
Correct.
depending on what's happening. And I think I really like that because it gives you latitude,
Yes.
flexibility, you know, and I wanted to hear from you. One, because of course, James Biggart is your great-grandfather, but from you as well as a journalist, hearing what's happening in the space and how we're having these conversations, you know, what's your take on, one, if your great-grandfather was here today, you know, what would he think of this conversation that we're having in the Tobago space in the context of those three terms that we talked about?
Yes, I think a really interesting question, intriguing to investigate how he would have thought in the early part of the 20th century in comparison to how we may analyze and investigate what we see in front of our eyes today. When I think of the work of James A. Biggart and the contribution and participation that he led in terms of developing the nation-building project of Tobago, I look at his aims were, I believe, to transform the society, to enable people to take hold of the decision-making process, so they had the opportunity and the right, indeed, to participate in decision-making on all questions, whether it's, as I've said before, education, infrastructure, the economy, social and cultural issues. So when I think of the question of autonomy, in that context, I think of how do people participate in making the decisions that affect their lives. And I think in terms of James A. Biggart, his contribution and his participation points towards someone who was directly involved. That's important. Everyone should be involved. This is an important question of autonomy as well.
Yeah.
Autonomous people, autonomous individuals, autonomous communities are communities that are involved in their life. They participate in their life. So how could the Tobagonians of that time, articulated by James A. Biggart and the people that he worked with and embodied by their activities, how could they contribute to the development of Tobago? Its economy, its infrastructure, employment prospects for the people, the development of industry or agriculture. How could the people participate in that at a high level, at an autonomous level, at an independent level, a meaningful level? This is how I see the question of autonomy. I hear a lot and I read a lot, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in other islands in the Caribbean where people believe that their problems can be solved by one of the words that you use, secession, to secede from a union, to break away from a union. And I think it's a phrase, a term, an aim, an aspiration, which appears to be useful, appears to be beneficial in a superficial sense. But we in the Caribbean, we in the region, we in Tobago, we are small island developing states. Mm-hmm. So in terms of how our economies serve our needs, how our economies serve the needs of all demographics in the society, will seceding from a larger body achieve an improved economy, improved infrastructure, developing our industrial communications, our agriculture, our ability to solve our problems? Can secession, can breaking away,
and to
can it achieve that?
negotiate? And does it put us in a powerful or a disadvantageous versus an advantageous position to negotiate trade?
Yeah,
right?
that's important.
As a CARICOM trading bloc, right? And that what we look at, we're looking at all the English-speaking Caribbean islands coming together to be able to have conversations with the larger trading blocs, the Americas, right? North and South America, Central America, to be able to have conversations with them where they, we're dwarfed by their population, by their land space, and perhaps even by the amount of money that they have to spend on those things. And it is not because we are not industrious ourselves why some of our Caribbean states and neighbors are not financially ahead. We have come from a disadvantageous position in terms of building other people up, and then they leave, right? Take the profit out of the Caribbean and left with it. And the UK is one of them, the US another. The colonies, that idea of a colony, you are to be used and not to be built up.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to look at ourselves and say, we aren't where we need to be, and we need to work towards that. And the union must work for all of us.
Yes,
just as CARICOM must work for all of us.
Yeah, I think it's important to address the issues in that way. As has been mentioned, all of the islands in the Caribbean, whether the English-speaking islands, Dutch, French, Spanish-speaking islands, have very similar histories. They have very similar recent history, I'm talking, a very similar history of exploitation, colonization, profits being extracted from the countries and taken to a metropolitan center to develop a metropolitan center, as opposed to investing in and developing our societies here. So 300, 400, 500 years after you might say participation in the colonial economy, we still have economic and political problems to address and solve. So on the question of how can we address these, like on a day-to-day basis, how can our society, how can our towns and our villages in Tobago or Trinidad or Barbados or St. Lucia, wherever we are in this region, how can our economies be transformed to serve our needs? And how can the economies of this region participate with, integrate with, collaborate with other economies? In order that there's some mutual benefit to the larger economies and to our economies.
Yes.
Because we are not industrialized societies, for example.
Not nearly enough.
We're not industrialized societies. Some of our neighbors may well be industrialized societies, but how can our resources be used to support those industrialized societies and vice versa? So there's some collaboration, some mutual benefit, and then everyone wins. I think this is an important question to broaden the debate about secession, economy, independence, integration. Some of these terms they become like catch-all terms.
Yes.
And in spending time debating them, discussing them, analyzing them, some of the more what could be considered to be mundane issues get left by the wayside. So if we're discussing infrastructure as mundane, it's a problem. Infrastructure is important. If we're discussing healthcare, social care, infrastructural development, education, they're not mundane things. They're important aspects of an economy which also need to be invested in and developed to establish a space in which we live that meets our needs. So I think this is another way to address that question.
Yeah, we're running out of time, of course, but one of the things I always in the back of my mind is the example of Haiti, right? How France, when Haiti wanted independence, how France basically said, well, give us everything you have and you'll get it, right? And left them bankrupt.
Yes.
And, now people start to have conversations with, they must have done something wrong. Why they're suffering like that? No, if somebody took all your money, you'd suffer.
Well, Haiti is probably historically emblematic of the problems that we have in the Caribbean, the history that we have and the problems that we have to overcome. Where a colonial power, first of all, attempted to genocide the indigenous people. After attempting to, and in some cases succeeding in genociding the indigenous people, they organized kidnapping, human trafficking, and enslavement of millions to work those people to death. And then when those people, that's our descendants, decided, no, we're not having this, we're going to fight to defend our rights, fight to defend our very humanity, up to the extent of declaring independence in the case of Haiti. These are very important historical facts to know and to understand, but also, as you've alluded to, the revenge seeking that the colonial powers have undertaken for the past 200 years. So we might look at Haiti today and say this country is ravaged, this country is in perpetual crisis. But we have to ask ourselves, why is this?
How did they get there?
How did they get there? Why is this? Why is the economy totally dependent on paying a debt to France?
Who is doing well?
Who's doing well?
What do you want? What do you want the money for?
So these questions, I think, have to be looked at carefully.
And then the repatriation conversation. I mean, is there ever going to be any real justice? And sometimes we say, well, you want justice or you want money. Sometimes the money makes them the money makes them feel it.
Yes, yeah.
And that sometimes is how you have to make them understand. Because when they have to pay, then they understand what your contribution really was, right? They don't want to acknowledge it. Give us back all the money you took.
Yeah. Well, this is a very topical matter, because 2 weeks ago in Samoa in the Pacific at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the United Kingdom government once again stated their reluctance or refusal to address the issue of reparations for the enslavement of our people and the damage done to our societies by the colonial experiment. They are unrepentant. They don't acknowledge the crime. We don't necessarily want an apology, but if they were to apologize, an apology suggests contrition and acceptance of guilt. So we're not expecting them to do that, but it's nevertheless the whole question of reparations is an important stand to be taken, not only for Haiti but all the islands of the region. And there's precedent for it.
And CARICOM has they have a they have a reparations committee.
Correct.
To deal with it. And I love when I hear the Honorable Mia Motley, when she puts in her 2 cents to that topic. I sit back and say, get it, girl, get it. No disrespect, just get it. Listen, we're out of time, but before we go, we want to head quickly into the green room because we don't want to miss this insight we want to share with our authors and publishers. And today we're going to be talking about what is a query letter. A lot of persons ask me all the time. And a query letter is a letter you send it to convince editors like Shaun or publishers like Eutille, Duncan, and Eutille Biggart Writers Guild Publishing House that you have a project that not only will interest them but will make them money, right? So that's what a query letter is. It is an introduction to your body of work, to your book, to get them to publish your stuff. And that is something that a lot of persons who want to get into traditional publishing get some skills, whether you get an agent or you figure out how to do it yourself. But a query letter is very important, super important, if you're going to look at being traditionally published. And we want to thank Mansa Enterprises for sponsoring the Green Room. This is a bookstore right there in Calder Hall in Tobago, and they don't just carry textbooks and stationery, but they also have local books. And as you look in that picture, you are seeing Mr. Dr. Dumas's book in the background. And they carry local books. So if you have a book and you want it to be shelved at a store, check Mansa. They offer you a $150 cash back through their store book voucher. So if you spend $500, you get back $150 in goods at the store. So get down to Mansa and spend all the cash you have and make sure you buy every book inside of there and make sure your literacy is tuned up to all. We want to also thank the Caribbean Book Marketing Hub. They have an author directory coming out soon, and for sponsoring the Green Room, we thank you. If you're an author and you would like to be featured in this author directory, a Caribbean author directory, get on to Caribbean Book Marketing Hub and leave your information with them on the form. There is a QR code on this form. If you scan it, you'll be able to input your information. Shaun, before we head out, just quickly, I wanted to ask, what would you say to a person who wanted, whether young or old, it could be a second career, getting that second wind in life. What would you say to a person who wanted to get into the profession of journalism?
It's a laudable profession, a laudable pastime. I would say to them, get themselves a pen and a paper and a notebook and find out what's going on in their community. There's always a story. You live in a village, you live in a town, you live in a city. There's always a story. Who are the personalities in your local area? What's happening in terms of sports, in terms of your local representative? What do they have to say? What are the issues of concern in your area? Investigate them, write about them, speak to the people who are influential, who have their ears to the ground, quote them, report on them. That's the first thing to do. And keep writing. Always write and read as well. Find out as much as you can about the world that we live in, the country that you live in, the locality that you're in. That's some basic advice I would give.
Listen, as you were talking, I'm just hearing, listen, if you're in a community, Shaun's advice to you is to become a community news reporter. You get out there and journal what's happening in your community. You'll be shocked. They're probably going to be so happy to have you walking around saying what's happening here, what's happening here. Yeah, go in your community and start there. Whether you're young, old, this is a profession you want to get into later on in life, there's no age limit, okay? So what he's saying is that write, read daily, and get out there and do the work of a journalist. Get in your community and communities. This is something for you all to pick up as an autonomous project, right? You can start your own community news and maybe a newsletter. If you're in Lambo, Goodwood, Crown Point, you can have your own newsletters. I love that idea. Listen, before they take off the lights and put us out, we're going to be saying goodbye to you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Shaun. Listen, cheers to you. Cheers to you. Thank you for being here. And those of y'all who are watching us, tune in next week when we bring another author we bring another wine, and we have a great time right here on Book Club Corner, talking about some deep topics, some happy topics, some light topics. And we'll see you next week, Wednesday, on Book Club Corner.